All right, guys. So, like usual, there's a couple of different ways in which you might be seeing this. If you're in GoToWebinar, this is where I get to see your chat, and it's live. I can see it instantaneously. It takes me a while in Facebook. Jason saying he can hear Washington State, where Sandra is coming in from on Facebook. If you're watching on Twitch, I'm not really checking comments over there. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll catch you after this and just make sure to say hi and see if you've got any questions or anything I can do for you guys there. And then also the quality is better in GoToWebinar because it's pretty much a straight shot. It's not going through something else and dealing with all the bandwidth. So we have a great conversation tonight, and I know it's late for some of you guys in Malaysia. It's early. We have with us today here Josh Herman, and Josh Herman's, gosh, Josh, man, I think you're like the most versatile character artist I know.
Thanks.
You've got the craziest career out there, and I want to dive into that and see what it is,
Sure.
because you've really been leading the way, I think, in a lot of ways. So you're like the canary in the coal mine that survives.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to go by, I guess. Yeah.
You're still alive. So, all right. So the way this is going to work, guys, we got some questions. We're going to talk to Josh and get to know what he does. We're going to have Q&A every now and then, so you can throw your questions at me. If you're in GoToWebinar, I'm looking at your questions right now. And otherwise, I'll open this up for Q&A at the end. I'll tell you right off the bat, too, there is a course that we're going to be talking about over at Concept Art Workshop or Game Art Institute. There's a course that is really kind of the focus of this. And if you know me and you've been following me, a lot of what I do is focused on getting people jobs and what it takes to get a job and what it takes to keep a job and what as an artist. This is something that I've been very, very focused on for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, because when I was in art school, nobody talked about jobs, and now you learn stuff and you master it and you put the time in, you get the job. You don't even have to be that nice. It's just, you just got to be great. Nice is a definite plus. So, all right, let's get this in. And Josh, thanks so much for joining me, man. I know it's late.
Yeah, no problem, man.
All right, so tell me a little bit about
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Tell me what you do now, and we're gonna back this up a bit. But tell me what you do now, because this is Are there other people in this position? It's the first time I heard this job.
I've heard of it before, but I'm the character art director over at Cloud Imperium Games, and I'm working on Star Citizen. Our game, I guess maybe part of the reason you haven't really heard of this job too often is because our game is really big, right? If you know anything about Star Citizen at all, or if you're a Star Citizen fan or don't know, basically the scope of the game is massive. And because of that, to do art direction for the entire game would be a really, really difficult job, because you would have to cover all of our spaceships, all of our environments, all of our small landing zones, all of our planets, all of our characters, all of our props, and all of our weapons, which is just a lot of stuff. And so the way we broke it down for our company is that we have art directors for kind of each department, I guess you could call it. So I'm the character art director. We have a ship art director. We have an environment art director. And then we have another kind of general art director that covers props and weapons and stuff like that as well. And so basically what a character art director does is I oversee the character concept team as well as the character art team. So basically everything from the idea of a character to the implementation of a character. So that goes from, part of my job as me, not just like the overall scope of what I do, is also looking at how to push the art in different directions. How we, looking and collaborating with other art directors and art departments to kind of come up with new and cool stuff and figure out what we want to do. I also do art myself to kind of do what I was doing a little bit at Marvel, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But that's basically just trying to do bar setting art. So I'll do it. I don't have as much time as I used to when I was just, an artist sitting down and kind of, I guess a lot of people would call it like in the trenches. But now what I'll do is try to do a piece of art that's kind of saying, this is a direction we should go in, or this is something I want to try, or or maybe do a key piece of art here and there to kind of forge a path, rather than sitting it down and doing, X amount of a model for X amount of time to just uh, to do work. So it's kind of a different. It's similar to what I've done before, but it's also different.
All right, got it. So we're gonna talk about character art and what you used to do in a bit, and I think
Mhm.
those of you guys who have been tuning in, character art, we have a boot camp on character artists for games, and this is something I've talked a lot about. But you're a character art director, so walk me through, if you don't mind, like what is a day like? What are the kinds of things that you're responsible for?
Sure. So average day, basically, um, art director is kind of a half management job, half critique job,
Mm.
half um, art job. So I guess that's more than half. That's thirds. But I'd say a good portion of my day is going around with the team and reviewing artwork.
Yep.
Right. So basically, making sure that everything's on track from an artistic standpoint. Um, it also that that part also involves both character art and concept art. So I think that's probably my favorite part about the job is it's not just a concept lead or a character lead. It's kind of somebody that oversees both of those. So when we come up with a fun idea as a concept, it's also taking it from, handing it, working with the concept artist who's doing that, and then handing it off to the character artist, and then overseeing that as well. So giving feedback not just on the concepts, but also on the character art, all the way from, the high poly sculpt to the in game to the bakes to the textures to the materials to the rigging to the skinning to what it looks like in game to when you get into game assets, you're working into all kinds of things. Like you can make one asset and then you maybe want to make a bunch of different colors of it so that you have different variances of it. So um, you know that's probably my favorite, and the big chunk of the time at my job is seeing one asset, but realistically it's a lot of them, but seeing them from beginning to in the game. Other parts of the job when it comes to art direction is kind of like I was saying, it's more the manager side,
Mm-hmm.
and the manager side is hiring, staffing, recruiting, making sure that your artists are happy. The people, the actual your team, because essentially I am those artists who I oversee as managers, and that means you're talking to them on a personal level. You're getting to know everybody on your team. You're um, looking for new opportunities for them to grow, but also looking to find new people that can fit into the team. And along with that comes tasking and tracking and scheduling, and all the high level stuff that comes in with that job. So when we have a new concept that comes in, I'm the guy who kind of points and says, okay, I think so and so on the team would be the best suited for this, or maybe this is this is a good piece of art that would really push this person.
Mm.
It would be nice to see this person grow. So let's give them an opportunity to kind of stretch their legs a little bit.
Let me ask you
Um,
this: what do you look for in somebody who you're going to bring on to your team? What are like three key elements that you think are really important to make sure that they're a fit for your team, not just artists in general? We'll probably talk about that, but just your team.
sure. Um, I look for a couple different things. The first thing that I look for is going to be range.
Mm-hmm.
Range is something that I value a lot in an artist,
Mm-hmm.
because especially at somewhere like our game, where the scope of our game is really wide. We're going to do everything from just people in clothing to people in hard surface armored suits.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do creatures. We're going to do as super realistic stuff. We're going to do some kind of you know more sci-fi, different types of things. So I value somebody who's able to kind of go from one range of that, doing a creature, to somebody who's going to be able to do a realistic character with cloth and seams and stitches and texture work and everything that kind of goes along with that. So the first thing I look at is range.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing that I really look for is just kind of personality, to be honest.
Yep.
um,
I hear that a lot.
it's somebody that's going to fit into the team. I mean, and the biggest thing that I really look for is, um, it's hard to describe, but I would basically call it having no ego while having a little bit of ego. And what I mean by that is I want somebody who's going to feel like they're going they want to do the best work possible, right? They want to continuously try to grow. They want to see an opportunity with a concept or with a character and try to push it as far as possible.
Uh-huh.
And with that, I want them to have a little bit of an ego saying, I think I can do better, or I can push this further. That kind of competitive spirit
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what I look for. But at the same time, I still want somebody who's going to be relaxed and chill when it comes to personality. And also, if especially in whenever you're dealing with concepts, um, if multiple people are concepting the same thing, eventually, typically, somebody's is not chosen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And character artists, maybe there's the one concept that they all want to do, but only one of them gets to do it. And I want people who are going to be, they obviously want to do it and they want to push themselves as far as possible. But if they don't get to do that one, then it's no big deal. They'll kind of let that roll off their sleeves, but they're going to want to try to do the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I kind of look for that. I'm a competitive person. I enjoy being around competitive people, and I think that I kind of look for that. But it's also trying to balance the chill aspect of that.
Yeah. And would you say that you're hiring um, beginners, intermediates, or advanced? Like, where are you targeting?
We target all over depending on what we're hiring for.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, right now I have 2 character spots open. Actually, we just opened 2,
Yeah.
um, and we're hiring for kind of mid-level. If I, but I'm also the term I've heard before is opportunity hire, which is basically if I find somebody who's a junior and they're really good for a junior, or they have a lot of potential, just clearly,
Yeah.
I'm fine to go down to a junior and say like this person's worth investing in,
Mm-hmm.
right? When it comes to a senior, typically what I'm looking for a senior is somebody who's going to be able to work really autonomously, somebody who's going to be able to kind of run. Let me give them something and they'll be able to run with it.
Yeah.
Um, and somebody who's just going to really produce really good work is what I'm looking for in a senior.
Yeah.
In a mid-level, it's kind of a little bit of um, just kind of all around. I want them to have some range. When you're a junior, I don't expect you to have incredible range, right?
Right.
When you're a mid-level, I would say I would want you to have at least a solid amount of range.
Okay, good. That's
Um,
exactly why I was asking what level, because the range is one of those things where somebody hears that and they're like, shit, it's another year of hard surface. And oh, now I got to learn Marvelous. But, really what I was wondering
yeah,
is, this idea of the opportunity hire, like what are the triggers that tell you that somebody's an opportunity, like somebody is worth investing?
sure. Um, I mean, a lot of that's going to come down from their portfolio,
Yeah.
right? If I see stuff in their portfolio that's maybe 2 images, but they're really awesome,
Mm-hmm.
then and they have nothing else in it, that's going to make me curious to know, why did they only have 2 things? How long have they been practicing? How long have they been working? Um, Whereas if I see somebody who's got a portfolio of 10 things and only 2 of them are good, I'm going to look at their history as far as how long you've been working. Okay, you've been working for a couple of years. You've been getting better. They've been getting better. Okay, it's just I think I'm looking for things that stand out.
Yeah.
Right, I'm looking for that kind of odd anomaly that sticks out and says, "Oh, this person's interesting. Why have they been working for so little time? Why are they still freelance? Why are they, that kind of stuff that sticks out."
Mm-hmm.
When you just look at somebody's portfolio and you're like, this dude's from nowhere, but he's got super killer work. Why is that? Um, and I think that those people are worth investing in because I think, maybe just haven't been given the opportunity, right? They
Yeah.
haven't been, I know plenty of artists who've, were self-taught or they, went to school for a long time or they, all different types of things. So it just really depends.
Yeah.
Um, If it's senior and an opportunity hire, it's kind of the guy who's either from a hiring standpoint, you're basically trying to poach somebody, saying like, I really want this guy.
Yeah.
Like this guy's really good.
Yeah.
And you want to get that guy. Or it's, somebody's leaving and going freelance and they want to try something different.
Mm.
I kind of like that stuff to allow people to do different things and to kind of grow. And I think that's one of the things that I look for.
Cool. Let's take a look at some of your Cloud Imperium, because you recently posted some of it. I know there's probably a lot you can't share, but and this is Cloud Imperium. Yep. Star Citizen aliens. Did I lose your audio? Yes, I did. Lost your audio. It says,
Sorry about that.
Yeah, there
Yep. Sorry, here's some of the aliens. I was talking the whole time. So yeah, these are some of the aliens that we did for Star Citizen. So just going to go through some of these. So at CIG, we have 5 alien races, and we've just really been starting to update some of them. So the top image here is kind of 3 of our different alien races that we've. This is actually these 3, and then this one are 4 of them. The 5th one we haven't announced. Well, we've announced, but we haven't released any looks at it. So this one is the Vandul, this kind of big tall guy in the back. This guy on the left is the Banu, and then the right is the Xi'an. And so what we're trying to do with this image was just kind of get a little bit of the idea of who these 3 alien races are as a culture. So it's kind of a fun thing to just kind of put together to, show that this is kind of more the aggressive race. This is kind of more an interesting wandering race, and this is kind of more of a stern, proud race. And just kind of put together the 3 aesthetics of what they're going to be, or what they could be wearing. One little thing that's interesting about working at Cloud Imperium, which is different than probably any other company in the world, is that we are open development, which open development basically means that we're going to show stuff to our fans, to our backers, to the public whenever we can, essentially. So as compared to working, at Marvel or at Naughty Dog, where you basically work in a very confined area for a really, really long time, and then when you're all done, you end up showing it off to the world, right? Like that's kind of the idea behind your standard development cycle.
If it's even released, right?
If it's even released, absolutely. So whereas here, the Vandul is by far our most finished one, but these 2 I wouldn't consider them necessarily final. This is kind of just a, hey guys, we've done older artwork before and we showed you what they looked like. Now here's an update to this one, and here's an update to this one. And then this is kind of where we're at. So, I think that's a really interesting way to work, where you're essentially just showing your process to everyone.
Yeah.
This one down here is the Tavaran. And so this is actually the Tavaran in their battle armor. So it's kind of, the Tavaran are one of the ways we've described them is kind of a Bushido Ronin-esque race, where they've kind of used to be at a really high heights, and now they've kind of fallen and integrated into the rest of the human society. But they still kind of carry around that proud warrior race to them, like that kind of ideal with them. So obviously, the inspiration of the kind of samurai armor is kind of where we took a lot of this stuff from, and then kind of sci-fiing it up and kind of taking it from there. So these are some of our concepts that we just basically, released to say, hey, we're working on the Tavaran. This is an idea of where we want to take it.
Got it.
And then the Banu below this is another more in-depth kind of thing you see here. These is kind of a trading race. They have they're really friendly with everybody, but they're also very curious. And so we wanted to try out some kind of eely, shiny skin and just some ideas with what we could do with that. So yeah, that's kind of some of the alien work we've done, and this is actually
all
more of
concept
my work
at this phase, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
This is all concept work.
how long does it
Go ahead.
take before this transitions into the actual game?
I mean, if they were final, because all these are 3D, it wouldn't. I don't want to say it wouldn't take long, but it takes less time than starting from a 2D image.
Yeah.
Like if we wanted to do some quick prototypes and get them in game, and which we've already done, like check their sizes against a human so that we can walk around them to say like, is this guy too tall? Is this guy too short? You know, is he too thin? You know, because sometimes you'll see that in games. Um, the weird thing about working in games is that you don't control the camera, right?
Yeah.
The player controls the camera. So they're going to be able to crouch and just stand and jump and be obnoxious and do whatever they want, which means they're going to be able to see these characters in any way that they choose, not necessarily the way that you choose. And what that means is you really kind of need to go over it with a kind of a finer eye to say, like, you know, if this guy's too thin, he's going to look like Jack Skellington, like if people are getting too close to him or too far, like he's going to read really awkward. Or if he's too short, he may look fine from a distance, but then when you get close to him, it's going to look like he's like at your belly button, and it's going to look really awkward.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of play more in with that. But to get him to a prototypable state really doesn't take. It really doesn't take that long, to be honest. But a lot of this is key shot. You know, ZBrush work with this one, key shot work to do some quick textures, different materials, and then just a lot of final Photoshop, just paint over to kind of resolve some of the areas, you know, or to add a focus to something. So yeah, that's some of the alien work, and then some of the other work that we've been releasing recently is some of our promotional work. So we released these shots about 8 months ago, I think.
Okay.
And this is essentially, let's see if this gets bigger. I guess that's the biggest it gets. But these are essentially promo art for one of our modes called Star Marine. And Star Marine is our first-person shooter deathmatch module, which is basically, you know, akin to like a Call of Duty or a Halo or something like that, where you're fighting each other.
Yeah.
And so these are shots taken from in the engine, you know, lighting correctly, and then doing some little touch-ups with Photoshop to kind of just boost the lighting or add focus, you know, darken the edges, stuff that you do to kind of just create a focus in the image. So the cool thing about these as compared to the previous ones that you were seeing is that these are all in-game assets. This is all stuff that's in the engine and is rendered in the engine.
Yeah.
And then the image down here is, you know, this is kind of our good guys, and these are kind of our bad guys. So
do you have any
creating two?
Sorry to interrupt. Do you have any 3D like wireframes or any assets? I don't know if that's something you can even show, but production assets that we can look at.
I don't, but I can point you to somebody that does. So again, kind of one of the fun things that we do.
Yeah.
I'll just show off one of my guys who did a lot of these. So you'll see this is Omar Oweda. And so this is actually probably this Marine here is this one. So you'll see he's posted up some of his artwork here, and this is, you know, it's kind of standard shots of them. Some promotional art shots of them.
Yeah.
And then just high poly sculpts. So we don't have any wireframes or anything like that, but we do have you know, some nice shots of them.
So how many polygons are we talking about in game? And this is a number that's just exploded over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for us to see, you know, a character that's 80 to 100,000 triangles. I think that's relatively common for us. One of the things that's unique, it's not super unique, I mean, but something that we do, like in these shots here, is all of our armor is it's a modular system, right? And what that basically means is like this chest piece here, this arm pad, and this leg pad, and then the helmet are all swappable. So I can take one arm on and I can put it on another one and do all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And when it comes to poly count and stuff like that, it makes it a little bloated, right? Because that means like I'm not like when I get in here, if this is swappable, that means like right here you can still see that this mesh right here, this kind of tan mesh,
Yep.
is the same color as like the rest of his suit. So I'm not really able to hide a ton of polygons.
Ah,
And I want to be able to show it where even if this leg pad came off, this undersuit would still look okay,
yes.
right?
Yeah. And
So all that is
normally,
kind of
normally that would be gone, right? That you just get rid of
normally
the,
that would go away.
yeah.
Yeah, and we do that with all of our characters. So every character that is armored has an undersuit by default. That's kind of like our design is that you have an undersuit. You can kind of
Yep.
see it like here, this kind of neoprene thing with
Yep.
this lighter green.
Yep.
And then all the metal on top is the armor. So anything that's being added on top is additional polys, it's additional textures, it's additional stuff. So that's why it's a little hard to say, because I could say, you know, just this guy without his helmet on, maybe no more than, I don't know, 40,000 triangles, 30,000 triangles with
Which
his head.
is, for those of you guys
But,
who aren't used to triangles, it's 20,000 quads. So,
yeah. So, but now if he's got all his stuff on and he's got a helmet on and maybe he's got his weapon and he's got all his, you know, his grenades and his pouches and all that stuff on, it may be triple that, it may be quadruple that. So what we do is kind of build to the worst case scenario. And that's essentially, you know, build something that's bulky, that's heavy, that's high poly, that uses a lot of its own. I'll search back for Omar's stuff because he has a good example of that. And we kind of go from there, because fortunately we have some fun limitations where basically we're use only PC, right? And we're using CryEngine, which is kind of known for being a high fidelity renderer. It's really good at rendering. It's really good at crunching polys. Really good at doing all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
So we don't really have too many issues with that.
Now, you know, while we're here, actually, this is a great moment because Tommy asked a really great question. And I'm asking it again here, Tommy. So he's just posted it a second time. Because earlier you were saying, you know, for the opportunity hire, you're looking for something that's interesting. And while we're looking at Omar, if we could just take a second and just like, what makes somebody interesting? Like, is there something specific, some trigger that tells you, Josh Herman, that this is interesting and this person has, you know, potential? Because, you know, with character art, there's like 20 million things you got to do, right?
Sure.
So
So if
what
I'm
can they
looking,
focus on?
yeah, like if I'm going to look at Omar, I mean, fortunately, Omar was working at CIG when I got there.
Yeah.
So I didn't really hire him. But if I were to look at Omar's portfolio and be like, why would I want to hire Omar? These things here are already CIG things, so I'll omit those and
Yeah.
I'll omit these,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But basically what I'm seeing is somebody who's got a good eye for doing hard surface stuff, right?
Got it. Yeah.
He can do a car. If I'm looking to do anything hard surface, cars are always good. This is CIG work, so I would have to omit that.
Yeah.
Some of this probably is. So he can definitely do hard surface work. You know, he can do robots. He can do really, and there's two different distinctions here too. This type of a hard surface work is detail focused, small shape focused. It's all about a lot of little shapes making up one big shape, right? And that's a key thing as compared to something like this car, where I'm looking at the car and I'm saying this is one really big shape, but it's one refined shape. So its highlights and reflections are nicely gathered. It's looking, you know, obviously it's looking like the car that I would expect it to. So that's two types of hard surface work kind of right next to itself. And then next to that is basically putting some of those two things on top of another thing, which is a character. So he's got character work here. He's got some more hard surface work on top of clothing. He's got kind of big shapes, kind of little techie shapes. So I can, if I'm looking at him as a candidate, I say, okay, he can do hard surface. He can do big, simple, you know, refined shapes. He can do techie, small shapes. And then the rest of his work up here is all organic stuff. So if I'm looking here, I'm saying, okay, he knows how to do cloth. He knows how to do texturing work. He knows how to do, there's another good shot of it. He knows how to do good presentation, which is a good thing, right? He knows how to present his model nicely. He's, able to do things that are finely detailed, as well as having big, areas of rest. And then other things like this is, okay, he's able to do, more, I think this is a concept piece or a sculpt piece. I'm not actually sure it says concept, but so he's doing super organic stuff now at this point, right? We're looking at more figurative stuff. We're looking at clothing. We're looking at, so it's like a complete, if I look at this image here and then I look at this image here, they're almost completely different, right? As far as the subject matter.
Range.
You got an organic, yeah, the range is already right there.
Yeah.
And then going on that another step further, you see that even further.
And then how important is the lighting and the rendering for you?
I think when it comes to your portfolio, I think lighting and rendering is incredibly important. I have some, if we look back at mine, I have some that are not terribly well presented. Like I think some of this stuff down here, some of my older stuff from Real Steel, it presents the model, but I don't think it's incredibly sexy of a render, right? If I were, 5 years, however many years later it's been since I did this, 7 years almost, I would probably redo these, right? As far as the presentation of the render.
Yeah.
But it gets the point across for what I have. But if I'm looking at a presentation of if I'm looking at somebody's reel, the presentation, if it's good, is not noticeable, right? If it's bad, it immediately is noticeable, and I can say, oh, that doesn't look good. Like, why? Okay. So then all of a sudden I'm having to look through this person's presentation to figure out what the quality of their modeling is, or the quality of their sculpting, or the quality of texturing. Whereas if their presentation is good, like I think this presentation is pretty solid, I can say, okay, first off, there's a nice simple render. The lighting's good. Now I can evaluate the materials. I can evaluate the textures. I can evaluate the model. So I think it's really important, but I think it is one of those kind of subtle things that you don't know that you're looking for it until you see something that doesn't really hold up.
Great. And I think we got a really good follow-up kind of question for this from Victor Felix over on YouTube. Victor's asking, I want to know if the modeling area is oversaturated now, because it seems that this is an area that everyone wants to start with and already has a lot of great professionals. And so that kind of dovetails with this idea of how do you be interesting? Because, Victor's kind of right. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to get into this, but do you think it's oversaturated for really great quality talent?
I don't think so, no. I think there's still a lot of open positions. I think there's still a lot of, people trying to find good people, to be honest. Like I said, I have 2 spots open now. I've had one of those spots open for 3 months, and I haven't found like the perfect candidate for me. There's been a couple people that have applied that have been, that we've gone through an interview process, but it wasn't right. So I don't think that that's necessarily, true, saying it's super saturated, because I mean, I'm looking for people. So I do think so, as far as things that make you interesting or things that stick out, I think a lot of that is coming down to picking the right personal projects, picking the right things to go in your portfolio. If I look at if I look at whoever's portfolio and it's got, just fan art, which is fine. It's fine to have just fan art. Some of that's interesting. Or it's got just design work, or it's got just speed sculpts, or it's got just one kind of thing. I kind of look at that and I say, oh, this is all this person wants to do, right?
Yeah.
Or this is all this person knows how to do. So if I'm seeing only speed sculpts from somebody, I'm going to say, well, does this person know how to do a finely detailed model? If I'm seeing somebody's art it's just fan art, I'm going to wonder if they just want to do fan art, or if they want to, I don't want to have questions in my mind, I guess, when I'm looking at a portfolio. I should look at it immediately and say, oh, this is somebody has a a good interest in a couple different types of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That's really a good point. And I'd agree, Felix, that there's Victor. Sorry, I was using your last name. That there's a lot of people entering this field and talking about it, but I mean that's all white noise. And correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but even though there's a lot of people doing this, like real pros, people who are really geared towards this and this is their life, like this is still not a there's still not enough people, you know, for the
No,
work that
yeah.
needs to be done because this is serious work, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's definitely one of those things where there are a lot of people entering. There's a lot of people trying to enter,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But there's not. I think that'll. I don't know if this is true, but it feels like a lot of people probably get. Um, they don't get to the point where they get, fully into the job, right?
right.
They're getting to the point where they're trying or they're interested or but if somebody's really committed and really devotes themselves for a year or a couple months or however long it is it takes them to like get that entry level job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and I think the key part of that is there's a lot of people vying for the entry level jobs, right? And once you get to the entry level job, I mean, not to scare people off, but the fun's not over. Like you still got to keep working. Like you got to, if you want to keep working your way up, if you want to work on, whatever your favorite game is, you know, unless you nailed your job and you got an entry level job at Bungie, then you probably want to keep working on your work,
Right.
right? You want to keep working on your stuff. You want to keep pushing yourself. You want to get to that mid level position, or you want to, keep working on stuff. So somebody else, all of a sudden you're posting up your personal work and your professional work. And now people are interested in hiring you at another company. And, now you start moving around. And I don't think, I think there's definitely not a saturation. Like I'm not, and I'll speak from personal experience where, like I said, I got spots open and I'm not looking at all these resumes and like just, wringing my hands saying, oh, look at all these wonderful resumes that are coming in. It's, they're there. And I would say, to be quite frank, 90% of them are not up to the professional level yet.
Yeah, that's
So,
I've heard that time and time again. In fact, I was thinking about this so much that I did this video where I was really trying to communicate to people that being a character artist means after ZBrush, right? like ZBrush is, oh hey, I'm
yes,
sculpting, but that is nothing. I mean, I mean, that's just getting your
that's,
foot wet, you know.
yeah, that's like, I think we were evaluating our pipeline the other
Yeah.
day, which is, a pipeline meaning all the steps it takes to make a character. And in the process of going from concept art to in game, there's 40 steps.
Oh wow.
One of those steps is ZBrush, right?
I
So if you're
love that.
interested, if you're interested in being in games or you're interested in being in film, that's cool. Like, don't get me wrong. But like of the actual character artist steps, I think there was maybe, let's see, we would have high poly, and then we would have game asset, which means topology. And then with topology, you need to get your topology approved from the rigging team. So that's kind of a topology approval, which means you kind of go in this cycle back and forth till the topology is finalized by the rigging team. So that's 3 steps. And then after that, you start your texture, your bakes, which would be 4. And then you start your texturing and your shading, which would be 5. And then all of a sudden now you can put it in the game. So that's kind of 6, where we basically give you a 6th bug step. So there's like 6 steps ish to say this is the character artist's job.
Mm-hmm.
And only one of those involves ZBrush. And that one's not, it's probably the biggest bulk of time, but it's not really, you know, it's not the whole chunk of time. It's not 90% of the time.
Yeah.
It's maybe 50% of the time.
That's great. That's so great to hear. And look, for example, we've got Crispy over here on YouTube saying, "Can I be a character designer without having to do 3D?" And I'll throw this over to you in a sec, Josh. But
Mm-hmm.
it's one of these things that I keep hearing, which is if you're starting the question with, "Can I do it without having to do?" You've already lost the battle because
Mm-hmm.
the technology's moving, and if you've got any hesitation to learn this technology, like just you know, why bother? Why go down this road? Because 5 years, 2 years, ZBrush isn't destined to stay on the top of the heap forever. I love the program. I used
No.
to develop the program, but they know as well as everybody else that competition's fierce. It's
Yeah.
why Ofer works so damn hard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is it possible? Yes, it's absolutely possible to do it without it, but you have to be really good, right? And I'm not saying that this person wouldn't be good. I would assume that, there's a lot of people who can paint or photo bash or do all kinds of 2D design techniques that work. I was just pulling up
Yeah.
Ryan Meinerding, and Ryan's a fantastic painter. I can tell you right now that this is 100% Photoshop, right? All these are almost 100% Photoshop, depending on what you're looking at. But I can tell you that certain things, like this head, is ZBrush. This is a ZBrushed head rendered in Keyshot, and then the rest of this whole character is painted. So, like when you're looking at something and saying, like, can I do this without? Oh, look, well, Ryan did it without, except no, Ryan's doing stuff in Keyshot. Like there is some 3D stuff in here just because sometimes it's easier to do, or it's easier to, like, I know that for example, one of Ryan's things that he's done is he's posed characters and just lit them for reference,
Mm-hmm.
right? No, and that's no different than saying, like, getting a photo of yourself, taking a photo of yourself, or taking a photo of a model, just like Norman Rockwell, right? You can still do that, but now you can do it in 3D, and you can at least mock up the things that you want to do. You can create your own reference at that point.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I
so
think
yeah,
it's misunderstood. Like, for example, how much photo reference Norman Rockwell used, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. He used it all the time.
yeah. If you pull up, if you look at Norman Rockwell's process or J.C. Leyendecker or any
Yeah.
of those kind of classic, Saturday Evening Post style painters, they're using photo reference like all the time, and it's necessary. I think it's necessary for character artists too. I think it's necessary for almost every part of the design process where you're using something else as a reference point.
Yeah. Maximus has got a Maximum Customs has a question, and it's trademarked, so maybe I have to pay to say that. Hey, Ryan is wondering if it's possible to get a job in the game industry without a degree. And this one's kind of close to me, obviously, because I do not want a
Mhm.
degreed school for me. But do you look for degrees? How important is degree to your equation? And I have no idea what you're going to answer, so I might get
Yeah.
screwed by asking this.
um, I don't look for degrees. I'll be flat out. And I'll say that from personal experience, nobody has ever looked for my degrees.
Hmm.
I have a bachelor's of science in animation, and I have a Noman School of Visual Effects high-end CG certificate.
Oh my God, I forgot. You
And
actually went to school and then had to go to
yep,
school.
that's right. I went to get a bachelor's of science. I went to a school that did a 4-year degree. I did the 4-year degree. And to be straight up honest, the degree and the teaching and the education at the school was not very good.
Yeah.
And so when I left, I tried to get jobs. I wasn't good enough. I remember I had won a competition at my school, um, and they got us tickets to GDC. And I was going to school in Colorado. So we flew out to GDC to San Francisco, and I had printed out business cards. I had my reel ready. I had a portfolio ready. And I went up and I started, you know, trying to interview and approach companies at the job fair and say, "Hey, I'm interested in, I'm graduating now. Are you guys, I'm pretty good. I won a competition to get here."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I got laughed at the door, but nobody gave me a second look,
Yeah.
right? Nobody was interested in me at that point.
Yeah.
Um, and
And,
that's
you know,
so at that point I had to choose, right? Do I
mhm.
want to continue school or education, or do I want to, you know, settle into a career that I could get with my current skills, or, what would I want to do? And so I chose to continue school, and I went to Noman. Noman's not a certificated or accredited school. I think they are now, but they're not now. They weren't then. And since then, nobody's ever looked at my degree, and nobody's even asked for my degree.
Yep. So it's all the work. You're just looking at work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I look at somebody's resume or their CV when they send it in, I might just, because I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
oh, where'd you go to school? Oh, you went to school at SCAD. You went to school at wherever, art institute, art center, all different kinds of places. Or if they don't have one, it's just that they're homeschooled or self-taught or whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't really look for that kind of stuff because I don't, to be honest, and maybe I just don't really value it.
Yeah, and I've told people
Like I
this
don't see.
for a while, but the education industry has not served the film and game industry. Like it just never has. It's never pretended to. I mean, I remember working at
No.
Pixelogic, and we were trying to get USC to buy copies, and we were trying to get different places to buy copies, and even after Lord of the Rings, even after it was a de facto, you simply could not work in this industry without knowing ZBrush. They couldn't have cared less, right?
I remember at my school in Colorado that I had to buy my own copy of ZBrush.
Mm.
I had to buy my own DVDs. They wouldn't even I said, "Will you guys buy some DVDs for our school?" And they said no. They wouldn't get any type of education for the current clearly the up and coming software.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. And so, yeah, schools don't necessarily, especially big, massive accredited schools, I don't think they're interested in serving a smaller niche market industry. And I think that's to them, as compared to a doctor, you know,
Yes. Yes.
or a lawyer or something like that, that's a very small industry.
A bunch of ragtag video game artists. I mean, come on. Who wants to be associated with us? Hey,
Right?
Maximum has got another question. So I'm asking this because it dovetails into it. Because the real question now becomes like, if you don't look for degrees and you're looking for somebody that's interesting, and part of it is you're looking for range. And I know we're spending a lot of time on what you look for in people, but I think this is such a valuable question of like, how does somebody okay, so there's two parts to this question. What is it that somebody needs to do to get a job is one, and I think we've kind of addressed that. But then the
Mhm.
second part of it that Maximum's question is uh, the psychology within themselves, within ourselves, of what does our artwork have to look like, And so I've noticed, that there's, especially in students, there's this stage, this relative stage. It's like, the work is better than the work I did last week, so it's really great, and your mom likes it, but somebody else looks at it and they're like, well, you fucked up the eyes, and where's the
Mhm.
nose, and
Mhm.
like anybody could tell there's problems with it, but we're really happy, right? Because it's better.
It's better, yeah.
Yeah. So and the part of psychology, we have to do that just to stay motivated. Otherwise, it would be just depressing. Just constantly see where you're falling short. But at the same time, you have to do that. So how do we know? How do you know when your work is better and getting better? And what's that experience like for you, even though you've been out there for so long?
It's a really good question. I think uh, I'll break it into two parts. For the first part, which is, for the up and coming artist, right? Somebody that's learning and they're really trying to get better, or maybe they're trying to get their first job and they're not sure if their skills are good enough to get in the door,
Yeah.
right? I think that's what a lot of people, especially coming out of school, or they don't know, right? They just don't know. I would look at people's portfolios. Like that's what I would do. I would look and say, okay, look at the big top schools. Look at any big school that's or any you know I know that Concept Art Workshop has had a couple people start getting jobs, and
Oh yeah.
look at the student work there. I would imagine that a lot of the people coming out of the big schools and even Concept Art Workshop is going to be most likely, if it's probably one of their first jobs, right?
Yeah.
And that means it's probably equivalent to junior level work. And I used to use the analogy, which I don't use anymore because I think it's a little too harsh, but basically saying, look at professionals' work, and you need to be that good,
Yeah. I
right?
I say that too,
You
but
know,
it is. I mean, that is really kind of brutal.
It is, and it's a little harsh and it's a little brutal, but it's also, if you want to do Iron Man, this is what your work needs to look like, right? It needs to be this level. That's not trying to say that I'm not trying to boost myself. I'm just saying like this is what it looks like, right? If you want to do stuff at Naughty Dog, if you want to do like the stuff that Adam Scott's doing, like if you want to work and do characters at Epic, look at Adam's work. What does
Right.
that look like?
Yeah.
You need to hit that level.
Hit
Now, of course,
LinkedIn, look at the artists,
yeah,
and then research their art station.
sure. Now, of course, like I'm saying, that's also a lot of the people I'm talking about right now are senior level artists,
Right.
right? That's what a senior level artist needs to look like. Now, if you're coming into the industry, look at the people that got jobs there as juniors, or figure out where people that worked there. There's a lot of people that work at every company that's a junior. Like I have juniors, Blizzard has juniors, Epic probably has juniors, I would assume. Every company is going to have a junior. And so look up their work. What did it look like? Is it how far off of it is it from Adam's work, the junior's work at Epic compared to Adam's work? You're going to see, I would imagine you see a difference. I don't necessarily know how to quantify it, but there's going to be one. So I would do that, and I would look at that kind of stuff, and just kind of use that as the gauge. It is, if you want to be professional, you got to be professional, but there's also a range within there.
Yeah.
And I think the second part of the question was kind of how do I do that for myself? Was that the question?
Yeah. Especially now, because yeah.
Yeah, I think what I do now is I look at other people's work. I think it's really no different. Like if I come in, like it's one of I think Adam's work is incredible. I think Ryan's work, who I was just showing you, is incredible. I think like I'll just pick some of the big ones that everybody knows, like Vitaly Bulgarov, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Vitaly's work is incredible. Like if I want to look at this work and I say, you know what, my hard surface design work, it maybe isn't this good. Why is his good? What shapes is he like? Not maybe I'm not trying to like steal his things, but what things are he using? What is he using that's making his stuff work? And
Yeah.
just kind of being critical and evaluating it. What is it that makes this work? How is he able to make these shapes? What's the idea behind these shapes? So I'll look at people's work like this. I'll look at artists like Raf Grassetti, look at their work. Let's look at people that are good. I mean, and that's not hard to do. You don't have to know the names. I mean, I can probably do it right now just by going to the top of ArtStation and going to picks and say, oh, who's somebody who's really good? My internet's probably a little slow because we're streaming, but um, just find something that's interesting to you, because everybody's going to have their own taste, right? Everybody's going to say like, oh, this is interesting. Majid's super good. Majid's trying a hard surface character. This is cool. Why is this cool?
Majid's great.
So we're kind of, look at everybody's stuff and find out things that are interesting. And like, I think that, I don't know,
Do you
I've
see
never seen this piece of art.
Vimal's Iron Fist?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that looks really
Uh,
nice.
like, this is interesting. Why is this working? Okay, this is cool. He's kind of got this combination of elements.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just always finding new inspiration, always finding people that you like and seeing what they're doing. I mean, it's a lot like looking at the masters, right? Like looking at the master painters and master sculptors and saying, why is their stuff so good still, right? What are they doing that's really good?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to figure out what that is. And you can do the same thing with any artist that you like. I mean, I can do it real quick, probably just by going through my likes. Oh, I have 35 likes. Okay. So I like some of Ryan's work. I like some of Dylan's work. I like some of, the Jared's work. Like,
Yeah.
why do I like these things? This is a really interesting painting.
I love
Some
Dylan's
really,
work.
yeah, this stuff's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like these super animated things he did for Wreck-It. Like that's He does awesome work. So, I think just going through different people's stuff and seeing why you like it, and uh, possibly pulling inspiration from it and using it in your next work. And I've done that. For example, this Silver Surfer that I did a while ago. This is basically going off people's work and learning at Marvel. Like, here's a bunch of techniques and design lines that I had learned, and I wanted to try something new. So I took all that and I kind of rolled it into doing one new design and one new model, and it came out like this. So, and then I take that as with my next one, and I kind of roll it into the next thing and just kind of keep going. So I don't know if there's a real technique or anything to that. I think it's just always trying to stay inspired.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's we're hitting our time here. So let's segue, if you don't mind, start talking about this class, because you've run a class over a concept art workshop. But really, I think it was one of the important things we wanted to make sure we communicated is this is probably a game focused class. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about what you're going to be teaching. Like, what is it people are going to be learning? What's the goal for you?
So it's still going to be primarily a design class and a modeling class, kind of like my last class was, but this time I want it to be more game focused. And what I want it to be is, when you start working in games, kind of like what we were talking about with some of this stuff, you have to think about a lot more scenarios than it's like what the assets are going to be used in, right? How they're going to be used, so, and that a lot of that comes from the player experience. So what is the player's experience going to be with this? Like I said, this stuff is all modular. Something that you may not pick up on right away, but is like this suit here looks different than this suit, but like the legs here are exactly the same, right? The arms here are exactly the same. So we got a lot of mileage out of basically just making a new chest piece and a new helmet and saying like, oh, and you can see even the arm straps are really similar, but the shoulder pads are different. So how can you take something and push it really far? How can you get the most out of it possible? And then with that, also when it comes to games, you're dealing in different types of things, right? The rigging and skinning limitations in games are far more restricting. You're not able to do super crazy rigs. You have to do something that's more basic. So that means, we try to not put stuff in certain areas, because if we do, they'll get stretched and they'll look bad. What does that mean when it comes to a character design? What does that mean when it comes into a character model? Okay, now you have big areas where you basically are like no-fly zones, right? You can't really do anything there. So how does that affect one design? How does that affect multiple designs? So I'm not expecting people that come into the class to have to do 10 designs. That's not really the goal. The goal of the class is to go through the class and make something that's going to work for whatever project you would want it to be in. And I think the big thing that I want to push with this class is kind of have people come into the class knowing what their goal is. And what I mean by that is, what project would you want to be working on? What game would you want to be working on? Or if it isn't one that's there, if you don't have a favorite one, what type of is it? Is it like WoW? Is it like League of Legends? Is it like Star Citizen? Is it like Destiny? Is it like The Last of Us? What kind of thing are you interested in? What kind of thing are you wanting to make? And then, helping guide people to make something that's in their style, that's in their goal, in their favorite thing that they want to work in.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So
we're going to go from the very beginning of like concept, go through some design, go through high poly, go through the whole thing. And, I want to kind of all be making a character as well as I go through that. But then also, I don't want people to have to say like, okay, Josh is teaching this class, I have to do something that's hard surface, or I have to do something that's creature, or I have to do something specific, because I want to basically be able to to be there and kind of mentor people through on whatever it is that they want to make.
Okay. And what kind of software are we going to be using?
We're going to be using ZBrush, a lot of ZBrush.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be using a little bit of Marvelous, and honestly, mostly just to kind of give people a crash course on it.
Yep.
You know, you can spend entire courses on Marvelous.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Especially when you get up to the higher levels, so some of the folds and
we're
wrinkles.
just going to be doing simpler stuff just to kind of like get people into the idea of using it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to do just some Maya work.
Great.
So we might do some presentation in KeyShot, but probably just, you know, staying in Maya.
Okay.
Maya or KeyShot.
Okay, great. All right, so what I want to do now, guys, is open this up for questions for you. So I know we've asked a lot of questions, but go ahead and start shouting out questions. Those of you who are with me live and go to webinar, I'll be able to see these right away. Those of you guys who are over in YouTube or Facebook, let me make sure I've got those sites open. I do not have Twitch open. So head over to facebook.com/Ryan.Kingsline. And you're just going to have fun with that last name. It's not, you know, it was given to me. I give it to you. Okay, let's check in with a couple of questions here. Elias, no, Brian. Brian is asking, hey, Brian, how you doing? 3ds Max, Moto, or Maya, which is best? And if I can dovetail on that also, what is important for a game artist? Do they need to get into Maya? Can they get by with Moto? Thoughts?
That's going to depend on the company.
Yep.
We use Maya, but we also have people that do, like our whole props department is done in 3ds Max. So that's not specific. Moto, I've had concept guys use Moto, but none of like the game engine stuff is really done in Moto.
And is for you guys is I was talking to Adam about this just the other day, but do you guys use Maya like a hub? So everybody plugs into Maya, and then is there a script that writes it out to CryEngine, or where do you guys assemble all the data?
Yeah, exactly. So when we're exporting stuff, we can actually export stuff out of Max or Maya, but the majority of the team exports out of Maya.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, if you're doing stuff in Moto or Max, you know, typically you're exporting and it's going into CryEngine from there.
Okay, got it. All right, and they were doing a similar thing over at Epic. They just, I mean, for them, Unreal is obviously the hub because that's, you know, that's their deal. Xander's asking, what's most rewarding about this job?
The most rewarding stuff is kind of being able to work on. It's kind of weird because you work, you know, as an artist, you're working on one thing, and you got all the guys, you know, working around you, working on their own things, and you see everything going through the process. And at the end, you're seeing, you know, everybody's work on screen, and that's super exciting. Being in an art director job is basically taking all ownership out of the product,
Mm-hmm.
meaning like I don't really necessarily do much hands-on sculpting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I might do some critique sculpting or some paint overs or stuff like that, but it's having a little bit of ownership in everything, having a little bit of, you know, knowing that the direction was there, or even if it's honestly just like some guy on my team is killing it. Like he's just doing awesome work. Every time I come over, I'm like, that's great. Keep going. That's great. Just keep going. It's kind of the rewarding thing is seeing all of the stuff as you're planning it and tasking it and, you know, trying to put stuff out there for your team, see all that come together. I think if I had to put it in another analogy, if anybody knows, you know, sports, like if you ever played basketball, the point guard in basketball typically is the guy who kind of sets up plays, right? If you play like League of Legends, like the guy who plays support, the guy who kind of just helps everybody else out, like that's kind of how I feel a lot with my job, where it's like I'm not necessarily doing the highlight play, right? That's not like showing you Omar's work. Like that's not my work, that's Omar's work. But I was kind of there trying to, you know, help and support him and get him through. So I think it's really is kind of that team aspect that setup, playmaker, support kind of thing that I really
That's what you
enjoy.
find most valuable now.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the job for sure. Is just like being able to be part of everything. I
Mm,
mean, I really enjoy and truly love like hiring and staffing and creating a team that's fun to be around,
it's
and
great.
going to lunch with everybody, and like we do things where um, we'll pick a movie on Netflix because everybody has Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll all watch it at the same time. Like we'll all work, but everybody will hit play at the same time, and so we'll all watch it at the same time. So kind of just fun stuff to like get, have a fun team. Like I enjoy the team and the staffing and this whole setup of that.
Well, you guys heard he's hiring, so I think everybody just applied.
Oh, good.
So
I'll
there
check out
might
my
be an
applications
influx.
tomorrow.
You might see my name there.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, a couple more questions. Let's start with Ari's asking, what do you recommend for people who have access only to the free software? Things like,
I assume that's like
yeah,
Blender, and I mean, I've seen some cool stuff out of Blender. So I would say, push it as far as possible. There's obviously going to be limitations, right?
hmm
I don't think Blender's going to be able to sculpt as good as ZBrush is. Um, but then if that's true, then bend it to your either bend it to your will and make it super good, or work within its limitations. Like that's no different than working in a game engine.
yeah.
Like if I'm working in the League of Legends game engine, I'm not going to try to make Star Citizen because it won't work.
All right,
So
I'm gonna take a different tact on this and correct me
sure.
and tell me what you think. But I'm gonna say for Ari, my thinking on it is that this game, these companies, and you're in a great position to correct me if I'm wrong. Uh, they don't really take chances on people. Like they take chances on people who they feel can do the work. But
Oh, I see the direction you're going.
but
Yeah, I
would
would
you
agree with you
hire
there. Like,
somebody who doesn't actually know substance and has no proof of substance? Like that to me, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would definitely be difficult. If you're like in the entry stages of your career and you're like just learning the software,
Yeah.
I think learning Blender for a little while and like trying to make the best thing you can out of it is fine. But if you're like actually ready to start applying, you need to know at least the basics. Like you'll at least if you came in saying I only know Blender to my to apply, I'll be frank, I wouldn't be able to offer you a job because um, I would expect somebody to know the basics of ZBrush. I would expect them to know somebody even if they knew a different sculpting package that pretty well, like Modo, be like, can you sculpt in ZBrush? Yeah, I can figure it out. Okay, like that alone is taking a chance. So I would expect somebody to know the basics of Maya, ZBrush, probably Substance.
Yeah.
I think that stuff's all super important. So I see what you're saying with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And T-Rex is asking about 3D coat and things like that. And I'll, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll just tell you guys point blank, you can use whatever you want. People want to see that you can sculpt, but at the same time, you got to use what the industry uses. And
Yeah.
there's just no way around that. So if you don't have access, you got to get access. I mean, Substance is what, $49 a month. You do that for 3 months, and just learn the nature of their, procedurals and work it.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're saying, if somebody said like, "Oh, I know how to sculpt in 3D Coat,"
Yeah,
well, that's great. But like, if you apply for my one of my positions, we only work in ZBrush, and all my guys work in ZBrush. All their files within the company are within ZBrush. So either you have to come in and learn ZBrush, which is a chance, and you better be pretty good for us to take that chance on you, or you're going to have to come in and like I'm trying to play it like you would come in and request 3D Coat, and then nobody else can work in 3D Coat except for you. Like it's just kind of a weird scenario where that would happen. So I would say, yeah, you would have to know
yeah.
what the company is using.
Cool. Great. I'm glad to hear that. And I've seen this and heard this so many times, guys, that I can't recommend it enough, man. Just stop playing around you know, with the toys. Find out what the pro tools are. And there was a story, a friend of mine, Paige Bradley, used to work with this guy, Richard McDonald. Richard McDonald's pretty big sculptor, and he was telling her this story from Art Center. In Art Center, when he went to school, one of the classes, it was a watercolor class. The teacher walked in the first day, and on the list that you had to buy was a $500 brush, and this is like, I think 30 years ago. So $500 was like it was even more. But you did not continue in that class if you did not buy a $500 brush. Why? Because you can't paint like a $500 brush without the $500 brush. It doesn't work. That's why it's a tool. So get the tools, because these are the tools. Some people don't like hearing that, but at the end of the day, if you want a job, which is my goal in life, is that you guys get jobs and that everybody grows, and that's why. I mean, I'm very fortunate to work with somebody like Josh. This is not something that somebody in my position gets all the time. Josh is just flat amazing, and we haven't even been able to get into his career and all the crazy that he's in. So I'll make sure you guys have access to some of the previous webinars, because he's been at Marvel, he's been at Naughty Dog, he's been freelance. Like, he's had a choice of what he's done. But I think we had a really great segue in this conversation, especially now with your new career or your new transition, Josh, where you're now actually shepherding people and you're part of this team. It's so awesome to hear your insight in terms of what you're looking for and what people need to do to grow. So.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I really enjoy it. I mean, I think it's just kind of the next step. I mean, for me, it's kind of, I mean, there's the obvious, creative control. That's kind of one of the fun things of being in my department as well, but also, or being in my position. But at the same time, the reason I stepped into this type of position is because if I could do every model, if I could do everything, I would. But that's not possible. I don't have that time, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna. That's not. You can't make any game typically with just one guy trying to do everything. So, especially not a AAA game. So, now I'm in a place where I get to help other people, and we all get to kind of be part of the same thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's end this with one more question from Lindsay, who's asked it twice. Sure. She's saying, how do you weigh the importance of the technical skill of a potential hire with their ability to present interesting concepts? And to add on to that, I think it's a great question for us to talk about, this idea of the technical skill, the technical execution, and then how much the creativity and the interesting ideas, how much is that, and where are you looking for? What do you think is most important in people today?
I think that I guess I would have to ask a follow-up question, which would be, do they mean technical, like by the ability, like the rendered level of the presentation, or is that like the technical, like using a fancy software?
Technical skill of a potential hire. So my thought would be, and I'm stalling in case Lindsay's very fast at typing.
That's fine, sorry.
It's got probably something to do with the software, whether or not they're skilled in the software itself. And
as long as I think my opinion on that is that as long as you know it, I don't really care, as long as you can make good stuff out of it.
So for you, interesting concept is important.
Especially, I mean, she's also saying concept, so that to me sounds like it's more in the concept art side rather than is the character art side. So if you can make, super interesting art, and it is 3D or it is 2D, and it's well presented, especially on the concept side, I'm not going to care as much. Now, if you're going into the character art side, that's where it's much more of a technical job. Like I said, ZBrush is one of 6 steps. So if you don't know all 6 of those steps, it's going to be hard to get into a character artist job.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of the opposite depending on the department.
Okay, that is great. Let me see if she followed up. Lindsay. No, she says thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me live here. Josh, man, thanks so much for being here and for answering all of our questions. If you guys have any more questions, let me actually give you a link, Josh. You can throw it up on the screen.
Where is it? Okay, I'm going to put it in chat so you'll be able to see it. So you can just click that link. So if you guys are interested in the class, the course that's coming up over here, Concept Art Workshop with Josh, it's right there. I just sent you the link. You can see it up in the URL, or if you're in chat, you can see it. And in Facebook and YouTube, I'll go back and post it in the notes just so you guys have a direct link for it. Enrollment is open now. It's starting September 30th. Am I correct? Is that the right date for us? Lost your audio.
Yes, I did. Saturday the 30th at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. All right, guys, you don't got a ton of time. And if this is what you want to do, then you know what to do. So any questions, shoot them my direction. And then I look forward to seeing all of you guys in the course. And have a fantastic evening. Josh, again, thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
All right, take care, guys. Talk to you a little later.